Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an epic, 80-year historical saga of how a relatively small, flooded territory managed to fracture Europe's absolute most powerful empire. We're talking about the 80 Years' War. This was a brutal, incredibly drawn-out conflict between the United Provinces of the Netherlands and the mighty Spanish Habsburg Empire. It's a true David versus Goliath story, packed with religious upheaval, massive shifts in global power, and ultimately, the birth of a brand new republic.
To make sense of this massive conflict, we're going to break our journey down today into 5 pivotal chapters: the Habsburg crown jewel, sparking the rebellion, Alba's reign of terror, the resistance unites, and finally, a new European reality.
All right, let's jump right into Chapter 1, the Habsburg crown jewel.
So, picture this. You've got the core friction right here, setting the stage for war. On one side, you have the sprawling, absolutist superpower of Habsburg Spain. They're strictly Catholic and ruled by King Philip II, a man who totally viewed himself as a divine right monarch. Now, on the other side, you have the Netherlands. This was a highly localized, commercially driven region made up of 17 semi-autonomous provinces. They were super used to managing their own affairs, they had their own local mobility, and crucially, they were becoming increasingly Protestant, specifically Calvinist. It's a classic collision, right? A rigidly centralized empire trying to squeeze a decentralized, very independently minded territory.
Just think about this number for a second. 1,794,000. That was the massive population of the Spanish Netherlands back in 1560. We're not talking about some remote, unimportant outpost here. This was literally the immensely valuable crown jewel of the Habsburg inheritance. The region was anchored by booming cities like Antwerp, which was the cultural, economic, and financial center of northwestern Europe. So for Spain, losing the Netherlands wouldn't just be a political embarrassment, it would be an absolutely devastating economic blow.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, sparking the rebellion.
Now, you'd think all that unparalleled economic value would keep things stable, right? Well, not quite. The ideological friction was just too strong. King Philip II was deeply concerned about the rise of Protestantism in his realm, and acting as an uncompromising autocrat, he doubled down on these ruthless anti-heresy measures. In 1556, an edict was posted publicly throughout the region, literally outlawing all non-Catholic belief systems under penalty of death. It even encouraged neighbors to betray each other to the Inquisition. But here's the fascinating part. This didn't crush the Protestant movement at all. Instead, it alienated local Catholics who were horrified by the overreach, and it actually bolstered the Protestant cause, pushing the local nobility to warn Philip that he was risking an open revolt.
And they were right, because this brutal repression directly triggered the Storm. In 1566, inspired by Calvinist street preachers, mobs just stormed through Flanders and Brabant, destroying Catholic churches and smashing religious iconography. This iconoclastic fury was the match in the powder barrel, guys. It transformed what was basically a brewing political dispute about local autonomy into an explosive, full-blown religious revolt.
So how does Spain react? Let's look at Chapter 3, Alba's reign of terror.
Hoping to just crush the revolt with the sword before it could spread any further, the king sends the Duke of Alba to the Netherlands with 10,000 soldiers. Alba steps in and establishes this merciless institution called the Council of Troubles. They executed over 1,000 suspected rebels, and they didn't just target commoners either. They executed highly respected Dutch aristocrats like Counts Egmont and Horn. They seized properties, took over businesses, and forced thousands into exile. But Alba completely miscalculated. His reign of terror didn't pacify the region, it only united the local population even more fiercely against Spanish rule.
And that fierce backlash leads us straight into Chapter 4, the resistance unites.
Alba's extreme tactics pushed the local people to rally behind a really patient, calculating architect of rebellion. Starting with the iconoclastic fury in 1566, a charismatic leader named William the Silent, the Prince of Orange, steps up to the plate. He leads an exiled army called the Guizen. Fast forward to 1572, and Dutch privateers actually seize the port of Brielle, creating a vital rebel foothold. Spain responds by brutally torching cities, which, again, only surges support for the rebels. By 1576, we hit the pacification of Ghent. This is a massive moment where both northern and southern provinces, Protestant and Catholic alike, unite to demand the complete withdrawal of Spanish troops.
However, that total unity was unfortunately short-lived, resulting in a permanent geographic and ideological split. By 1579, the Catholic-dominated southern provinces grew fearful of Calvinist rule and ended up reconciling with Spain through the Union of Arras. In direct response to that, William the Silent oversaw the Union of Utrecht in the north. This northern, Protestant, rebellious union laid the permanent political foundation for what would eventually become the independent Dutch Republic.
Which all builds to a super high-stakes climax in 1581. The States General passed the Act of Abjuration, officially declaring that the King of Spain had forfeited his lordship. Think about how massive that is. This wasn't just some local treaty. It was a radical rejection of divine right. They essentially declared that because the King of Spain had oppressed them, he completely forfeited his right to rule them. This groundbreaking document would actually go on to inspire future declarations of independence worldwide. And even after William the Silent was assassinated the very next year, the Dutch absolutely refused to yield.
Moving on to our final chapter, a new European reality.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth did this relatively small, flooded geographic region permanently secure its independence against the mighty Spanish Goliath? Well, first, Spain dangerously overextended its military. In 1588, Philip II tried to invade England with the massive Spanish Armada, which ended in total disaster thanks to English ships, Dutch assistance, and some terrible storms. While Spain was distracted and drowning in debt, the Dutch were busy modernizing. William's son, Maurice of Nassau, transformed the Dutch army into a well-trained, modern fighting force that began systematically recapturing key strongholds, while Dutch fleets just dominated the seas. Spain was simply fighting on way too many fronts.
The final phase of this conflict was grueling. Pure exhaustion on both sides led to the 12 Years' Truce in 1609, which was a massive blow to Spanish pride because it unofficially recognized Dutch independence. When the fighting resumed in 1621, it turned into brutal attritional siege warfare, deeply entangled with the wider 30 Years' War going on in Europe, but Spain, completely drained by global commitments and financial ruin, could never overwhelm the deeply entrenched Dutch Republic. Finally, in 1648, the Peace of Munster was signed, officially recognizing the independence of the Netherlands and ending 80 years of bloodshed.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, it's clear the 80 Years' War completely reshaped the map of Europe. It birthed a global economic powerhouse in the Dutch Republic, and really marked the slow decline of Spanish hegemony. But you have to wonder, if Philip II had just listened to the local nobility early on, if he had moderated those anti-heresy edicts instead of sending the Duke of Alba to execute his own subjects, could this whole 80-year saga have been avoided? It's a fascinating lesson on the fatal cost of rigid autocracy in the face of a unified, resilient resistance. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning the history that shaped our world.